Imagine a battlefield where the enemy doesn't wear a uniform, carry a rifle, or understand the concept of a white flag. The year is 1932. The sun is a white-hot hammer beating down on the red dust of Western Australia. On one side, you have veterans of the Great War, men who survived the mud and carnage of the Western Front, armed with heavy Lewis automatic machine guns. On the other side, 30,000 flightless birds. Most wars are fought over land, ideology, or gold. This war was fought over wheat. But what began as a simple cull quickly devolved into one of the most bizarre and humiliating military campaigns in human history. It was a moment where the pinnacle of modern industrial technology met its match in a creature that hasn't changed much since the age of the dinosaurs. To understand how a government could declare war on a bird, you have to look at the state of the world in the early 1930s. Australia was reeling from the Great Depression. Thousands of ex-soldiers had been given marginal land in the West to start wheat farms, promised a life of peace after the horrors of the trenches. They worked the soil until their hands bled, only to find the price of wheat collapsing and a new feathered nightmare appearing on the horizon. 20,000 emus were migrating inland after their breeding season. They didn't see fences. They saw an all-you-can-eat buffet. They tore through the barricades, leaving holes large enough for rabbits to follow, and began systematically devouring the farmers' livelihoods. Desperate and broke, the veteran farmers didn't turn to the Ministry of Agriculture. They turned to the Ministry of Defense. They wanted the machine gun. The man who answered the call was Sir George Pierce, the Minister of Defense. He saw an opportunity for target practice for his troops and a chance to show the struggling farmers that the government was doing something. He deployed Major G.P.W. Meredith of the 7th Heavy Battery of the Royal Australian Artillery, along with 2 soldiers and 10,000 rounds of ammunition. They expected a quick massacre. They expected to be home in a week. On the first day of the campaign, the soldiers spotted a group of about 50 emus. They set up their Lewis guns, checked the sights, and opened fire. In the trenches of France, these weapons were legendary for their lethality. But the emus didn't behave like human infantry. As soon as the first shots rang out, the mob split into small groups and ran in every direction. The soldiers managed to kill perhaps a dozen birds before the rest vanished into the scrub. A few days later, a much larger opportunity presented itself. An ambush was laid near a local dam where over 1,000 emus were gathered. This was it, the chance to end the war in a single devastating volley. The soldiers waited until the birds were at point-blank range. They squeezed the triggers. The guns roared for a moment, and then a devastating silence. The weapons had jammed. By the time they were cleared, the birds had scattered, leaving only 12 carcasses behind. It was here that the soldiers began to notice something unsettling. The emus weren't just running blindly. They seemed to have developed their own tactical maneuvers. Each small pack of birds was led by a tall, dark-feathered male, a sentry who would stand perfectly still, watching the soldiers, while his companions gorged on the wheat. At the first sign of movement from the men, the sentry would give a warning call, and the entire group would vanish with terrifying speed. There is a specific biological reason why the machine guns were so ineffective. An emu is essentially a 30-pound drum of muscle and feathers supported by legs that can propel it at 30 miles per hour. Their feathers are incredibly dense, acting like a form of natural Kevlar that can deflect or slow down glancing bullets. Unless a shot hit a vital organ or the spine, the bird would simply keep running, fueled by adrenaline and a prehistoric instinct for survival. As the days turned into weeks, the soldiers grew more desperate. They tried mounting a machine gun to the back of a truck, hoping to chase the birds down and mow them down on the move. It was a disaster. The terrain was too rough for the vehicle to steady its aim, and the birds were faster and more agile than the truck. One emu even managed to get tangled in the steering wheel, causing the vehicle to veer off course and crash through a fence. The military reports from the front began to sound less like official records and more like tall tales. Major Meredith famously remarked that if he had a military division with the bullet-carrying capacity of these birds, he could face any army in the world. He noted that the emus could face machine guns with the invulnerability of tanks. They were, in his eyes, the world's finest guerrilla fighters. After a month of campaigning, the government finally pulled the plug. The tally was staggering in its insignificance. They had fired nearly 10,000 rounds of ammunition, roughly 10 bullets for every confirmed kill. The enemy had suffered a few hundred casualties, but their population of 20,000 remained largely intact. The media had a field day, mocking the military for being outmaneuvered by a bird that couldn't even fly. But the most surprising discovery didn't come from the battlefield. It came from the realization that human intervention often makes a problem worse. By attempting to use the tools of modern warfare to solve an ecological problem, the government had only highlighted their own hubris. The emus weren't an invading army. They were a natural force reacting to a changing environment. When the guns fell silent, the birds simply went back to the wheat. The bigger implication of the Emu War is a lesson we are still learning today. Nature is not something to be conquered, but something to be understood. We often view our technology as a master key that can unlock any problem, but the Australian outback proved that a million years of evolution is a far more robust system than a few decades of industrial weaponry. When we try to brute force the natural world into submission, we usually end up looking foolish. In the end, the farmers got their solution, but it didn't involve soldiers or machine guns. The government eventually put a bounty on the birds, and the locals, using their own knowledge of the land and traditional hunting methods, managed to control the population far more effectively than the army ever could. The birds remained, the fences were eventually reinforced, and the Great Emu War became a bizarre footnote in history. Today, if you travel through the wheat belt of Western Australia, you will still see the emus. They stand on the horizon tall and silent, watching the descendants of the men who once tried to eradicate them. They are a living reminder that while humans build empires and invent machines of war, the earth belongs to those who can endure. In the conflict between high-tech lead and prehistoric resilience, the birds are still standing.